I think in the interest of time, we might kick off. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Lunch and Learn session for this month. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Alexandria Smith from the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience at King's College London. Alexandria has a particular interest in the prevalence and prevention of mental health disorders, suicide, and self-injurious behaviours and substance use among diverse populations, including veterans. Today's presentation, Alexandria will be presenting some research that herself and her colleagues at King's have been leading on, looking at ONS data, particularly the health and occupational outcomes of ex-service personnel in the UK. So just a reminder, if we can ask everyone just to put themselves on mute, and we shall pick up some questions at the end of the presentation. And also this session is being recorded, and we'll be making this recording available on the London Centre for Work and Health website, making sure that we strip out people's faces and names and so on. So it's just the presentation itself. So delighted to hand over to you, Alexandria.
Great, thank you so much. I'm really delighted to present and to get the questions. So this is the first time I'll be presenting on this topic, so I'm really interested in any of the feedback we get as well, because we're still in the process of finalizing. So again, I'm going to present my work from service to census using the Office for National Statistics longitudinal study to examine the health and occupational outcomes of UK ex-serving personnel. So this study, we looked at the general health, disability, and economic activity of ex-serving personnel compared with civilians. And this project grew out of a larger collaboration that beta tested the new indicator for prior service in the 2021 census. And we carried out some of this work in partnership with colleagues at UCL, with Professor Nicholas Shelton, and at Edinburgh Napier University with Professor Ian Atherton, Carlos Ibanez, and Dr. Umair Lee as part of the beta test team. So before the 2021 UK census, there was no nationally representative data on the UK serving population. So our existing analysis relied on cohort studies and survey data. And this lack of systemic data collection really limited our understanding of the ex-serving personnel and hindered our evaluation of key social, health, and economic outcomes. UK government recognizes the sacrifices of serving and ex-serving personnel and their families. And through the Armed Forces Covenant, it acknowledges that these sacrifices and affirms its obligation to ensure that those who have served and their families are not disadvantaged. So to properly evaluate how ex-serving personnel are doing, we need a nationally representative data set. So in 2021, the Office for National Statistics introduced a new question to the census to identify individuals with prior service in the UK Armed Forces. This marked the first opportunity to collect data for the ex-serving population in England and Wales. So this slide is directly from the ONS. From the 2021 UK census, we can see how the ex-serving population is distributed compared with the overall population of England and Wales. It shows a percentage of people in each age group who reported prior service in the armed forces alongside the distribution of the general population. So as you can see, reflecting the impact of national service, a large share of the ex-serving male population is in that 80 and above group. So there are a number of factors that can shape the health and well-being of ex-serving personnel, both positive and negative. And this is not an exhaustive list, but just to kind of give an idea, we have, on the positive, we have a healthy soldier effect. So people coming into the military will be a high baseline fitness. During service, they're maintaining their fitness. There's excellent healthcare access with regular health checks and advanced treatment during service. And again, there's those social factors, strong bonds with peers and other family members in the armed forces. It gives a very solid sense of community. They're also counterbalanced with some potential negative impacts. So there's just general service exposures of wear and tear, those musculoskeletal injuries that you get after 20 years of heavy load bearing. There's occupational risks for those that are deployed, certain types of combat exposures and environmental hazards. There can be negative experiences of bullying, discrimination, and assault. Transition stressors are a range, so a loss of social network, a loss of that military identity, and sometimes some employment challenges when you're trying to transition your military skill set into the civilian employment environment. And also we know that early service leavers, so those that leave before their allotted time or for medical discharge, also have an evidence of poor physical, mental health, and economic outcomes. So for our study, using the longitudinal study, we focused on 3 specific aims, each linked to key outcomes of self-reported general health, self-reported disability, and economic activity among ex-serving personnel. First, we compared these outcomes between ex-serving personnel and civilians and examined how they changed over time. And second, we assessed whether these outcomes varied across social demographic characteristics, including sex, ethnicity, marital status, region, housing tenure, and education. So just to remind you, for this study, we used data from the ONS longitudinal study. And this is a nationally represented cohort of approximately 1% of the population of England and Wales. It comes directly from the census. The LS links individual level data across successive census waves starting in 1971 through the 2021 census, with individuals entering the cohort through birth or immigration and exiting via immigration or death. The LS has multitude of information regarding the demographics, general health, and socioeconomic indicators. And so for this study, we used data from the 3 waves, 2001, 2011, and 2021. And again, just to remind you, our 3 outcomes that we used came from the individual questionnaire. First, general health was assessed by asking, how was your health in general, with 5 response options from very good to very bad. Second, we looked at disability, identified through 2 questions, whether someone had a long-term condition, and if so, whether it limited daily activity a lot, a little, or not at all. And these categories align with the Equality Act definition of a disability. And then finally, we looked at economic activity using an ONS-derived variable, combining several questions that classified individuals into employed, unemployed, retired, sick and disabled, or full-time student other. We then identified ex-serving personnel through the self-reported prior service in the UK Armed Forces. And I've given both the examples in Welsh and in English. It was beautiful. Responses included whether someone was in the armed forces, yes, regular in reserve, or not at all. Given the potential differences in the service experience between the regulars and the reserve personnel for this analysis, we focused on individuals who served at any time in the regular armed forces. So this included 1 and 3. But there is the potential for a future study to look at the reserve component. So I'll walk through this slide a little bit, but here is the distributions of the general health, disability, and employment for the 2021 census stratified by sex. I'm comparing ex-service men to civilian males on the left and ex-service women to civilian women on the right. So just to help, I put a red box around the ex-service men versus male civilians. And, we're not seeing anything surprising. We do see, given the age distribution, the ex-servicemen did have worse health, more disability, and were less likely to be employed. But again, putting that in context, that this is not adjusted for anything. This is just the distributions. So going on to the right side, now we're looking at the females. We see a really similar pattern with worse health, more disability, and less individuals employed. So just to give also a little bit of flavor of what we're seeing looking at just the service members, I wanted to show the distributions of some key demographics among those who have served. The ex-servicemen are shown in gray and ex-service women in the purpley mauve color. We do see some regional variation between servicemen and servicewomen. There are some differences, clear differences by marital status. So ex-servicemen were more likely to be married, higher divorced or widowed for ex-service women. Educational differences were also visible with a little bit more women, ex-service women with degree, university degree or higher. And then not too much difference based on housing tenure. So pretty similar between the groups. I'm just going to briefly talk through the analytic strategy. But for this, we adjusted for age, sex, ethnicity, marital status, education, housing tenure, and region. We used propensity score weighting to balance a sample of civilians to ex-serving personnel. And then we ran a multinomial logistic regression model for health, disability, and economic activity separately, reporting the unadjusted and adjusted odds ratios. I don't talk about the sensitivity analysis in this presentation, but happy to answer more questions later. But we did run for the full project sensitivity analysis comparing all 3 waves to the 2011-2021 measures. And this is due to the fact that general health and disability changed the question format from 2001 to 2011. And so we decided to keep the question consistent and ran the analysis on the 2011 and 2021, but conducted a sensitivity analysis to see if anything changed for the harmonized variables. So first we'll look at our first aim of looking at the self-reported general health among ex-serving personnel compared to civilians and examine how these changed over time. I debated putting this in here, but it's kind of busy, but I think it gives a nice view of how individuals transition from their general health states. So this is just ex-serving personnel, and on the left side you have ex-servicemen, and on the right side you have ex-service women, and it looks at what their general health status of those 5 levels were in 2011, and then it maps it to their 2021 health status. And you can see they're pretty similar between men and women, and you see about half stay for the green. This would be from very good to good. You see about a third go from very good to good. So you have, and you can see how people change through these alluvial plots. So this just gives kind of a flavor of what are the patterns of shifts that we're seeing in our data. Oh, I've lost my notes. Here we go. So next is our forest plot for our multinomial analysis, showing the differences in self-reported health between first, this is ex-service women and civilian women. This plot displays both the unadjusted and adjusted odds ratios with the 95% confidence intervals. So we have the dot as the odd ratio and the horizontal line as our 95% confidence interval. And if that horizontal line crosses the -1 mark, it indicates no difference between groups. So anything above 1 means that ex-service women had higher odds compared to civilian women, and anything below 1 means that they had lower odds, and the reference category is very bad. So when we take a look, the adjusted odds ratio is the darker color. We see no difference between the self-reported health between ex-service women and civilian women once we adjust in our model. So here's the next, our next model when we stratified just to men. And it's a similar forest plot where we see after adjustment that only men with the fair category were significant with no other differences in any group. So otherwise our self-reported health looks fairly similar to civilian men. Reference category for this again is very bad. So then we looked at the disability of ex-service members to explore the self-reported limiting disability among ex-serving personnel compared to civilians and examined how these changed over time. So again, I have those alluvial plots for the serving personnel. And again, we see a pretty similar pattern between ex-servicemen and ex-service women and just how people's states changed from 2011 to 2021. So I'll let you guys look at this for just a bit. I need to make the code a little bit more beautiful, but it's in R, so it's a little bit prickly. For this, I combined both male and female together. So this shows the adjusted results, adjusted and unadjusted for disability. Women, again, are the red and the orange dots, and men are the blue dots. The reference category for this is no disability. So starting with ex-servicemen, the blue, they had a higher odds of both major disability and minor disability with a reference to no disability, because it's towards that right side. So after adjustment, it does lessen some, but they still have a higher odds of disability. For ex-service women, the main difference was in minor disability after adjustment, but no difference with major disability. So you can see after adjustment, they shift over. So our third aim was to look at the economic activity, to explore the economic activity among ex-serving personnel to civilians and examine how this changes over time. I didn't do the alluvial plots for this one because it really was a bit messy, particularly because some of the categories were smaller, such as the unemployed category. So these are just the models. So first, the women's model. After adjustment, we found no difference except for ex-service women had a lower odds of being homemakers compared to unemployed. So unemployed was the reference category. And then looking at men, so this forest plot shows the unadjusted and adjusted results for economic activity among men. And again, after adjustment, ex-servicemen had a lower odds of being students compared with being unemployed. But all the other differences became insignificant. So just some initial thoughts and summaries. Our key findings show that military service on a whole, on itself, had only minimal association with general health in England and Wales. For men, we saw small reductions in fair health and slightly higher odds of disability, around an 8 to 10%. For women, there was no difference in health, with only a small increase in minor disability. And so it kind of makes you wonder, you hear the media, you hear whatnot, but why do we think maybe some of these are so small? It's possible that we're just not, we're just not finding a difference. It could also be reflecting a diversity of experience within the ex-serving population. A long career can bring health advantages, while early discharges or combat exposures can add health burdens. So in the end, you have this protective factors can be balanced out by the risk and pre-service disadvantages, could be a flattening of an effect. What really stood out, and I wasn't able to present given the time, is that the social determinants, things like education, housing, and marital status, were far stronger predictors, and region. We saw some significant regional variation than prior military service. So once we adjusted and balanced out the samples, it was really these socio-demographic determinants that were driving a lot of the differences in outcomes. So looking ahead for future research, we really need to think about looking at potentially high-risk subgroups within the armed forces community. Look at deployment history, career progression, for instance, and how those health trajectories unfold in both the short and long term. And then we also need to consider differences in how health, disability, and economic activity may play out across ex-serving personnel in those subgroups to make sure that there aren't any different outcomes. So first, I want to thank the Colt Foundation for their support of this project. And we also want to thank the Office for National Statistics and CELIUS, the Center for Longitudinal Study, Information and User Support, for providing technical expertise and support for this project. They've been, the ONS and CELIUS have been fantastic. Any questions that we have, getting back to us and just working with us. I have my contact information if there's any additional questions with the study. And then again, I wanted to recognize the KCL team and the wider beta test project team members. And any questions?
Alexandria, thank you very much for a very clear and interesting presentation of your work. We'll open it up for questions from the group. We'll come to Paul Cullinan first.
Thanks, Alexandria. That was very interesting. If you could just go up a slide.
Yeah, let's see. Is this
your future research? That's going to have to be in a different population, is that right? You can't do that with a longitudinal study.
I have these dreams of as they start to do these data linkages that hopefully there's going to be some addition. Yes, you're right. So the longitudinal study at this stage, and I am going to let Nicola jump in on this one, but I think that there's going to be some additional potential there, but definitely I'll let Nicola take this one. See your hand. Oh, was that a jump in?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. No, sorry. I don't want to jump in, but it was yeah. The so there's the service leavers database pool that ONS are currently linking to all of their mortality and cancer registration data, and I've talked to them about, will there be that possibility of linking it to census data, and then that leavers database, I've been told, has got more data on people's military military experiences during service. So I don't think it's something that's going to happen quickly, but my understanding is that it's on the cards.
Yeah, thanks.
Danny, I think you were next.
Thanks, Alex. That was interesting. I was wondering what level that you have regional data at, because it sounds, when you say region, I think like quite a high level.
Yeah,
It is huge in terms of socioeconomic sort of activity and so on. I wonder if you could sort of drill down a bit more, whether that might give more precise estimates. Yeah.
And I'm opening. I want to see if I can open up my paper too to give. So for this study, I stuck, and please forgive me, I've been learning England, Wales region. We stuck with the larger 10 regions. But I do believe you can get like local authority, and when we did the application, I'm trying to remember back because it was a little while ago. Again, there's always going to be like more hurdles if you want more detailed data, and then us cutting it too fine with wanting to stratify to women. So we did keep it to the regional level, but you can get more fine. I want to say LCA, local authority, possibly codes. What we did find was what. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say I can never remember what the acronym is. It's socioeconomic output areas. Is it LSOA, something like that? You can get that a really fine.
I think you can.
Accurate in terms of the sort of socioeconomic status of the people who are living in that area.
Yeah, and I think because I really wanted to separate out women and men, is then you start to get it a little too fine. So that with the longitudinal study, because you're doing 3% of I think we have 3.6% that are veterans, and then we cut that to around 500,000 of the LS. So it gets too little. But it was, the regional findings were similar. What you saw, and you did see some gender differences. So like the northern, we use the reference of like the Southeast, and so you did see like the northern regions have worse health, and then Wales particularly with disabilities. And the regional difference was a little bit stronger for general health, I want to say, for males and females, but you did see the pattern in both. Any
other questions? Alexandria, I had a question. So your findings relate to all ex-service personnel. I was interested to know whether you looked at service personnel in different areas, so Army versus Navy versus Air Force, for instance, and whether there are any differences or not. Yeah, I wish we could have done that. We just have a self-reported whether or not you served. Yeah, so I think this is where that linkage or that future research would be really important to see. So this kind of was just that first initial pass of, now we have nationally represented data. What are we finding? Looking at like the umbrella groups and just seeing like what's the lay of the land now that we have something that is generalizable. But I think this is where we really do need to start drilling it down. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Any final questions before we wrap up? I don't think there's anything in the chat box. So Alexandria, thank you very much for sparing the time this afternoon and for coming along and presenting your research as well. Nice to see everyone again, and just to give people a heads up, our next session will take place on the 22nd of October. Stefania D'Angelo from the University of Southampton will be presenting some analysis on risk factors of long-term sickness absence and economic inactivity among older workers. So hope all of you, or many of you, are able to join the next session. So thank you once again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to present.
Thanks, Alex. Bye-bye.